Okay, this is a lesson for Year 10 Sociology, looking at education. It's our third lesson. In the previous lesson, we saw how the data suggests that the children of middle-class parents do better in education than the children of working-class parents. That was the evidence. Now we're going to look at some of the possible explanations as to why. So we're going to learn about the different possible factors. There's lots of them. Not that one's right and one's wrong. There's some truth in all of them. You've got to make an assessment as to how true you think the different factors are. So you are understanding and assessing these possibilities. By doing that, you are thinking like a sociologist. You're getting the right perspective. Keywords are material deprivation, not having things. Attitude, speech patterns, the way you talk. Cultural deprivation, not having culture. You're deprived of cultural things. Cultural capital, which we mentioned in the previous topic. Cultural wealth, we're talking about, knowledge. Opportunity hoarding, you keep opportunities to yourself and to your class. Labelling, expectations and self-fulfilling prophecy are all new terms we'll be talking about later on in this lesson. Okay, so why do working class kids do worse than middle class kids? Explanation 1. Material deprivation. Put simply, being poor. If you are poor, chances that you're working class. Yeah? There's no middle class poor people. If you're poor, this sort of poor, you are working class. You have worse diet, worse housing. That tends to make you ill more. Making you ill more is when you lose school days. You lose enough school days, you fall behind other people. The poorer you are, the worse you tend to do at school. You miss more school, you're sick at school, you're small. If you don't have breakfast in the morning, how can you possibly concentrate in classes, periods 1 and 2? Material deprivation. Not having the money to have the things you need to succeed. Linked to that, parents' attitude. So this is all to do with class. The bothered thing is a class thing. The middle class are bothered about their kids' education. If your parents don't care, if your parents don't think education is important, you won't think education is important. And studies show that quite a lot of middle class, working class parents aren't that bothered about education. They don't care that much about it for their kids, and their kids learn that. Do more working class. Speech patterns. We'll work on this later on, but there's 2 ways of speaking. Restricted code, elaborated code. Shut up! Could you be quiet, please? I need the phone for a minute. Same message, different way of giving it. Shut up! Restricted code tends to be working class. Could you be quiet for a minute, please? I'm on the phone. Elaborated code, same message, middle class. If this is the way you're brought up, these are the types of English you speak and understand. When you get to school, the teachers speak to you like this. If you have this code in your head, if you're middle class, the teachers make sense to you. And you make sense to them. If you have this code, when the teacher says, could you stop talking please and come and sit down, you literally don't understand what they're saying as a 5-year-old. Makes you fall behind. Linked to that, cultural deprivation. Yeah? So, standard toy, shapes, blocks, hammer. This, though, is the cornerstone of learning to read. Reading is recognising shapes. Reading is recognising shapes, telling one shape from the other. This sort of toy, when you're a child, teaches you to recognise shapes, to differentiate between shapes. Square, rectangle. This is the first step to learn to read. If you don't have these sort of toys as a child, your reading won't be as good. You'll fall behind. This is cultural deprivation. Cultural capital. Well, talked about it before. If this is something, if the British Museum is somewhere you go for a day trip with your dad, like my daughter here, you have what's called cultural capital. You're receiving cultural wealth. It helps you educationally. It also helps the teacher label you, come back to the word later on, as middle class, like them. Could be opportunity hoarding, meaning the middle class keep all the best jobs for their children or children like them. So David Cameron here, Boris Johnson at university, in a posh boys club, and now they're posh boys together running the country. Opportunity hoarding, keeping the jobs to themselves. We're doing more work on that in class. And finally, labelling and expectations. When you turn up at school, a lot depends on what your teachers think about you first 5 minutes. They're going to label you. If you are working class, if you have a restricted code, if you don't appear to be bothered, the teacher will label you as somebody who's not going to do well. If they label you as somebody who's not going to do well, they're not going to expect much from you. And we'll see in the future lessons in more detail on that. That can have a big effect on how well the middle class and the working class kids do at school. The middle class kids, the teachers expect them to do well because they've labelled them as clever and hard working. The working class kids, the teachers have labelled them as stupid and lazy, therefore they expect them to do badly.